think we still have some seconds, but just for your information, this session will be recorded, and I think only basically this square will appear in the video, and we will use the video only on the Euresearch website. But if you have any problem with this, then please come to me after the session. Yeah, I think we can start. So from my side as well, welcome to this information networking event by Euresearch. My name is Emile Dupont. I lead the SME and innovation section at Euresearch, including the Enterprise Europe Network Group. Just as a small parenthesis, we will move to the InnoSwiss from 1st of January of next year. So the Enterprise Europe Network Group and myself. InnoSwiss is the new CTI, to be clear. It's the innovation agency. But for now and for today, we talk about Horizon 2020. We talk about new bottom-up opportunities. And we talk about the European Innovation Council. This is the first time that I present, at least in Switzerland, these new actions, these pilot actions. And these represent actions that will be active in the next last 3 years of Horizon 2020. The idea from the European Commission side is to take better care of the innovation that's born in Europe. So to bring them really to the market and to have concrete outcomes in terms of job creation, in terms of growth of companies. As Commissioner Moedas says on the slide, they really want to help innovation get to the market. And so to do that, they collected a series of bottom-up actions, bottom-up project support, funding support, in a program that they called European Innovation Council, and this is what we will present today. And this is a big thing, because in the past, if you're a bit familiar with the framework programs, all of the calls basically were designed by topics, so you had to fit in a specific topic, in a specific call, in a specific thematic to apply. And in this case, for the next 3 years, all of these instruments are basically bottom-up, so you come with any idea you have, and you have a chance. So the agenda for this afternoon, for this hour in the afternoon, is very simple. I'm very happy that Charlotte Gerding is here from Brussels to present with me, and she will start with an introduction from the policy side or from the historical side of the history and the origin of the European Innovation Council. And then this is a perfect introduction to then go really into concrete details of the different actions within the Council. And this I will explain it to you in the second part. Now let me give the floor to Charlotte. Charlotte Gerding works since 2014 as a senior European advisor for innovation at Swisscore. Swisscore is the Swiss contact office for research, innovation, and education in Brussels. She has worked in Brussels for more than 7 years in the domains of European research and innovation, and she has a special focus on innovation aspects in the Horizon 2020 framework program. This includes the public-private partnerships, the EIT, and now the EIC, the European Innovation Council. And currently, she focuses on the Swiss Universities of Applied Sciences in stepping up their participation and visibility in the framework program. Also, she creates visibility for the CTI, who starting next year will have this international dimension as well. And she is also dealing with preparing the Swiss research and innovation community for FP9, which will be the successor of Horizon 2020, starting in 2021. Moreover, she acts as a moderator at various high-level events on European research and innovation. And she's a Dutch national and is fluent in English, German, and has a good command of French, which means that you can basically ask questions in every language that we can think about, and she will be able to answer. And in her spare time, she loves spending time in the outdoors, traveling and drawing. And I'm very happy she's here today, and I leave the floor to her. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for your patience, and it's good to have my Madonna-style microphone so I can give you a small show today. So, first of all, thank you, Emil, for the kind words and kind introduction. I don't think I need to say more because you've already seen me also this morning already. So I just want to start off with a small cartoon about the changing nature also of innovation and the things that we're dealing with, because taking photos was within the remit of really photographers, or you would buy your own camera. The Kodak moment, I mean, that was one of the most specific moments. Everyone would say, hey, please just gather for a Kodak moment. But now we have iPhone moments, we have Samsung moments, we have all kinds of different moments. So also this innovation is shifting where, as a photographer, you don't need to be a photographer from profession. Everyone can be a photographer nowadays. So, bringing from the cartoon myself to the origins of the Innovation Council, because I know many of you here are very happy and excited perhaps to apply to many of the different calls that Emil will talk about later. But I think it's very good to know a little bit more about the rationale and background and perspective on the European Innovation Council and the ideas behind why this is being created. So first of all, if you look at a comparison between the EU and the United States, you don't see there's so much difference in the amount of startups out there. It's quite the same. However, it really gets interesting when you look at the scaling up of these different startups. Survival rates in Europe are much lower than in the US. So we need to do more to support the survival rates beyond 2 to 3 years. And this is really a crucial period for companies to grow. So if you have a look at the different numbers, if you have a look at the growth rates under 5%, that tends to be 45% of startups in Europe that are in a growth rate under 5% compared to only 37% in the US. So we do see some discrepancies there. So even those who do grow, they don't grow as fast. So that's also one of the reasons why there are many kind of startups to say, okay, we are actually European-based, but we would like to go to the US. And also where you see that specifically in the US, a lot of investments are being made. Just for you to know, I'm really only focused on now the comparison between the US and the EU. I mean, if we could have taken Israel on board, you would have had a completely different picture again, for example. So why should there be so much focus on scale-ups? As said, there's plenty of support out there for startups, but not enough for scale-ups. And scale-ups are so interesting because they are able to create a disproportionate gain to economy and jobs. And 4% of these firms actually generate 70% of all new jobs. And this is a huge change. We could have many, many more jobs created. This could add a lot of value to our GDP if we would just step up our efforts. So we need to be able to scale, and we need to also see how we can tackle barriers to scaling up. So I provide you some information, some tables on, well, basically a questionnaire that the European Commission put out to gain some perspectives of SMEs, but also startups and scale-ups. What are their main barriers and obstacles to starting a company? Well, the first barrier is access to finance. It's also one of the main questions every entrepreneur starts with that wants to grow, is to say, okay, where do I get my funding? There are only limited pots of funding, of course, on the national level. So the European level could perhaps provide an answer here in the future. Second thing is the rules and costs of hiring workers. If you're a startup, you want to actually hire people quite quickly, but you also want to lay them off quickly. But they still need to abide really by employment laws on the national level. And those employment laws are very often not so conducive to the startup environment. Third aspect is the resources required to navigate the overall regulatory complexity. I mean, every country has different regulations, and especially if you think about doing activities cross-border, there's so many more regulations and legislation that you need to take into account. So these are extra hurdles, and honestly, many startups, they usually don't have time or the money to hire internal expertise to go through all the different legislative processes that they need to deal with. The fourth one is tax compliance costs, which is about filing and paying taxes. Of course, startups also need to pay their taxes. They can't be freewheelers. And a last point is procedures and costs to access industrial and/or IPRs. And IPRs, of course, are a very important aspect because they can create competitive advantage from one company over the other company. Then we look at scale up, and the first heading needs to say main obstacles to expand a company, not to start a company. My apologies for that. So for expanding a company, the first barrier is really securing financing for expansion. This could be debt and equity financing, but also, for example, venture capital. A second point is understanding and complying with employment law. There's compliance costs, specifically tax regulations, but also compliance costs with specifically the VAT regulations. And finally, also within the field of scaling up, there's a lot of uncertainty about regulatory requirements that need to be taken into account. So, what are, in a nutshell, then the issues that we're facing? First of all, too many regulatory and administrative barriers, especially cross-border. If you were here this morning, I quickly mentioned the digital single markets. But if you have a look at it, in fact, we don't have a digital single market yet, because we are still a sum of national member states, associated countries, but we don't have a fully fledged digital single market that can really give the push to companies to trade and to be active cross-border. Second one is that there are still too few opportunities to find and engage with potential partners. And those potential partners, you can find them in many, many levels. Support coaches for mentoring, for example, but also potential partners in the way of finding the right accelerator places, finding the right venture capitalists, finding the right banks that can help you out. All these kind of problems, they still need to be tackled. And a final one is too many problems in accessing finance, particularly to scale up. If you would ask an entrepreneur if they could get their funding, especially startup entrepreneurs, then usually they are able to find ways. And that is anywhere between, I would say, like 500,000 and 3 million euros. However, if you go beyond the 3 million, let's say 3 to 20 million, you have a huge problem. It's not easy to find this kind of funding. And this is one of the triggers for setting up this European Innovation Council, to see if on a European level this gap could be closed. So, putting another element in there, and I just would like to find out, whom of you have ever applied to Horizon 2020? Okay. Good. So we have about 50-50 here, so many haven't applied yet. Whom of you is actually an innovator? Good. Startup. Good. Thanks. Great that you're here as well. If you would be, I don't know, I just want to ask you, startup in which area?
We're making like EU prescription.
Prescription?
Yeah.
Okay, so health.
Yeah,
health.
Absolutely.
Okay, health. Okay. So if I would tell you, what's your name?
Rafael.
So Rafael. So Rafael, if I would tell you, okay, great, health. Well, let's get started, Rafael. You can apply to the Innovative Medicines Initiative. There's a European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging. But wait, there's also a program for ambient assisted living. Oh, wait, we have another program about developing clinical trials. Would that make sense to you as an entrepreneur? Well, you see, you're doubting yourself, exactly. Well, this is a problem, because there's so many programs out there on the European level that you as an entrepreneur, you barely know where to go to. I mean, if you look at different kind of innovation support in Horizon 2020, all across from early stage until close to market, you find many different initiatives. So one of the barriers, at least in Horizon 2020, is for you as an entrepreneur, as a startup, to find out, where do I need to go? So there's also a need, next to the access to finance, next to the regulatory barriers that need to be tackled, that there will be a one-stop shop for you to find out, this is where I can go, this is where I can get my funding, instead of having all kinds of consultancies to help you out to do that, because I'm sure you can use your money much better than that. So that will be a challenge for the future for sure. So what will be at least the first step for a kind of a simplification, and that is something that Emil brought up already, it's this massive idea of creating a European Innovation Council. So in June 2015, so we go back more than 2 years, this guy, which is the European Commissioner for Science, Research and Innovation, Mr. Carlos Moedas, came up with the idea to say, okay, I'm going to have 3 priorities during my term at the European Commission. He said, I'm going to focus on open science, open innovation, open to the world. And part of open innovation for him was to focus on a European Innovation Council. Well, I was sitting at the conference, I was like, okay, now the Commission is going to present us what they mean with the European Innovation Council. And then it was silence, because they didn't have a clue what to do. The only thing that the Commissioner really knew is that there's a need for support for market-creating disruptive innovation. See if we can help those innovators and entrepreneurs to get funding, to do wicked ideas, and to really create new markets that don't exist up to now. So that was his idea. So how far have we gotten right now? Well, I can tell you there's a rationale behind it. First of all, we need innovation-friendly framework conditions that we already discussed, about access to finance, overcome the regulatory barriers. We need to be able to support firms to scale up rapidly, and support can take any kind of form. It can be financial support, but also, for example, there could be a need for mentoring and coaching. There should be easy access to EU innovation support, and that's the one-stop shop I just talked about. And we need to be able to find new ways to source finance for innovation purposes. And that's going beyond just the regular grants that you might know, but also looking broadly, more broadly, at different loans that are out there, looking at crowdfunding, looking, for example, at blended finance and convertible loans, all kinds of different mechanisms that need to be put into place. So, what has it led to right now, and Emil can give you all the details later on, is that the European Innovation Council will now exist mainly out of 4 different kind of programs. That will be the SME instruments, it will be the Fasttrack to Innovation, it will be the Horizon 2020 prizes, and it will be the Future and Emerging Technologies. You might be wondering, why just do a repackaging and window dressing? Because you could see it like that as well. But there's a good reason for that. If the European Commission wanted to break open the whole Horizon 2020 legal framework, then we still wouldn't have had an agreement right now, and you would not be able to apply to any kind of calls, because that would need to be renegotiated again. So we just need to wait until 2021 to see what will be out there and how this European Innovation Council will look like. So if you have any ideas, I mean, you know, I work in Brussels, I'm there also to support you and to take your ideas to the European Commission, who's making new policy, who's already working on FP9. I would be happy to talk to you as well. So that's the contribution, at least from my side. And do we have time for 1 or 2 questions, if there are any? And then I'll just give it back to you. So if you have any questions. It's all clear. Oh, wow.
The last
Yeah.
pillars there, would that mean that the Euresearch program, for example, is out and changed to this new package?
Very good. So, what's your name?
Eric.
Eric just posed the question, what's going to happen to Eurostars, for example. Eurostars is a program which actually supports R&D intensive SMEs in calls, where there's a cooperation between many countries. What's going to happen to Eurostars? We don't know yet. A fact is that Eurostars is governed by a multi-level governance and an intergovernmental body where member states cooperate together, whereas the European Innovation Council would be something something that's more on the European level, not with member state involvement. So we don't know yet. I know that a lot of people within the State Secretariat that are also responsible for Eurostars, they're really trying to lobby to keep it as a separate program, but it might be the case that this will all be diverging into one European Innovation Council. We don't have any answers yet, just a lot of questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Will there be a link between the European Innovation Council and the European Research Council?
Yeah. Well, the first things that actually popped up to the mind of the Commissioner Moedas is that he said he wanted to create something for innovation that the European Research Council is for researchers, to really have an impetus to stimulate fundamental research. And the ERC, I mean, it's great branding. I mean, if you have an ERC, you can go everywhere. You have some funding to do your research. That same kind of branding needs to be installed for the European Innovation Council. But of course, research is something different from innovation. It's not as straightforward. So they still need to do some thinking how they're going to bring that together. Okay, if there's no final questions, then thank you for your attention, and I'll hand over to Emile. Yeah.
So I'll also get my Madonna headset on. Thank you for making me think about it, Charlotte. Thank you very much, Charlotte. This was a good introduction to the idea beyond EIC. And you probably understood that the big changes will come most probably in 2021. But there's already some changes now for the last 3 years of the program. And there's already some changes, even if the European Commission basically took some instruments that were existing and put them together in a package. They also changed these instruments. And these are very interesting changes, I think, from an entrepreneur point of view. So having said that, that's exactly my task today. So this is the presentation of what's happening now from the 1st of January 2018. These are actions that are going to be open. Well, actually, the submission will be open in the next days already, and they will go on until the end of 2020. I will give you also the deadlines for each action. What I can tell you is that already the work program, the final work program, was published last Friday. You find here a link. You can go through it. I also have it printed in one copy here, so it looks like this. It's not a huge, amount of pages, also because it's quite big font. And but if you want to have a first impression already, that's a word cloud of the introduction. So you see, we're talking about innovation. We're talking about support. It's also a pilot. So these are also try and error by the European Commission, I would say. So if you have any kind of feedback on these programs, if you have any kind of new ideas that you would want to have implemented in the next framework program, again, don't hesitate to contact Charlotte, to contact me and SwissCorps. If you go online, and I think it's the first result on Google by just typing European Innovation Council, this is also new. You find a web page on which you can open some kind of guide. It looks a bit like you remember the Microsoft Word dog that appeared to help you with questions that you might have. And by answering to some questions, like you are a startup or you are a small size enterprise or you are more like a large industry and you're looking for partners or you're looking for a single individual funding program, then this assistant will direct you towards one of the 4 instruments of the European Innovation Council that best answers to your needs. So this is already something that can help you navigate a bit through this map that Charlotte showed you and that I already oversimplified by taking away all that's not in the European Innovation Council. So basically you can see the axes are like starting from the left, it's very early stage research, so this is far away from the market. Going to the right, that's really the market entry. And on the Y, there's projects that are for single partners, so you can apply individually, and there's projects that are for consortia, which are smaller or larger consortia. The instruments in the slide are the SME instrument, the Fasttrack to Innovation, the Future and Emerging Technologies, and the Innovation Prizes. These are the instruments within the European Innovation Council. Then Eurostars, which you mentioned before, I introduced it here as well, but I will not go through it, but it's also just as a reminder for you that there are other possibilities as well. So if you don't fit into one of these programs, don't be sad, don't try anyways, I would say, even, because there are other opportunities that might fit better for you and for your company. The SME instrument is existing since 2014 for the European countries, and since the beginning of this year, 2017, for Switzerland as well. And it was and still remains in the ideas of the Commission, the European Innovation Champions League. So this is a very low success rate program for very, very innovative companies and very, very innovative projects. And it will remain the same in the future. And as in the past, it's also divided in 3 phases that somehow follow the complete life cycle of an innovative idea, from really the first concept down to commercialization in phase 3. There's funding available for the phase 1 and 2, and there's other kind of support available for phase 3. Something that's very important to understand is that these phases are kind of one after the other in the idea of a complete innovation project, but you can absolutely apply for a phase 2 directly without going through a phase 1. And I will go through these details more in the next slides. So as I said, SME instrument supports really innovative projects. These are ideas that are not incremental, so you're not improving something that's already existing, but you're really creating a new market, or you're opening the market to new products. But at the same time, you have to specify, you have to identify before applying the needs of the customers. So the European Commission wants to see that you already thought about the impact that your idea will have on the market and on the European population, actually. And of course, it's a project that funds innovative ideas, and it's for innovative companies. But apart from that, you can be a startup. We have SME instrument winners that are one-person startup. You can be a small or medium-sized business. So you can already have been established for a couple of years, but you have this innovative idea and you can apply to this. SME instrument funds high-risk, high-potential projects. And last but not least, you don't need other partners. So as a single SME, you can apply, you can receive funding and support. The support follows the full cycle of business innovation, as we have seen, from the concept to the commercialization in this way. So the phase 1 is really for a feasibility study, and we can go through it. And it really means that the support you receive here is to help you get a grip on the technical feasibility of your idea, but also on the commercial feasibility of your idea. And to be a bit more precise, the activities can include any kind of research that concerns bringing your idea to the market. So market analysis, client or customer segmentation analysis, IP management should be already in your project. And what you have at the beginning of the project when you do the proposal is an initial business plan, a very rough business plan which describes your idea and how you want to bring it to the market and what kind of market you think. And the outcome of the project is a much more extended business plan. So you're still at a quite early stage in your idea. The projects last around 6 months, and they are funded by a 50,000 euro lump sum. So you don't get more, you don't get less. This is what the Commission thinks that this is, let's say, the 70% of the costs that the Commission thinks you will have in order to develop an elaborated business plan in 6 months. Of course, again, in the slides, you see a lot of buzzwords, I would say, but it's really important to really get them inside you. The European or global or growth-oriented strategy is something that the Commission looks for in these projects. So you really have to show that your market will not be the Swiss market, but you really aim at a larger international dimension. Even more details on phase 1 again. This will be structured with respect to cutoff dates as it is this year already. So the submissions are always open, but there are 4 cutoff dates per year, after which the proposal received will be evaluated in around 1 month, and you receive the results 1 month after. The indicative budget, you see it there, and you see also that it grows during the years. And for phase 1, so this is the indicative budget of the whole European Innovation Council, the whole SME instrument. And for phase 1, you can see that 10% of the budget is reserved. Other important information is that proposal length is maximum 10 pages, which is an advantage because you probably don't need to spend a lot of time in it, but it's also a disadvantage because you have a lot of things to say, and 10 pages is quite small. So here is just time for a quick advertisement. At Euresearch, we provide also proposal advice. We are mandated by the State Secretary, so the services are for free. We can review your proposals, we can help you when you have a more concrete idea on a bilateral basis. So don't hesitate to call us for this. Then the evaluation is also important to understand, the evaluation procedure. It's done by 4 experts. It's done remotely, sorry. So the evaluators receive each copy of your proposal, and they will evaluate it with a note from 0 or 1, or 0, 1 to 5. There are 2 criteria in order to actually rank your proposal. The first criteria is that the median of the 4 notes you receive has to be 4 at least. So basically what they do, once they have all the notes received from the evaluators, they take the 2 notes that are in between for each one of the impact, excellence, and implementation pillars. They take the 2 notes in between, they do the average, and that's the median. And this has to be more than 4. Second criteria involves some weights. So as you see there, the impact is weighted much more, is weighted actually the double than the other 2 pillars. So impact is 50% of the full evaluation. And excellence and implementation are 25% of the full evaluation. Weighting the median gives you the weighted number that you see at the end there. And the sum of these 3 numbers have to be equal or above 13. So once these 2 criteria are achieved, then your proposal is ranked. This is not all, unfortunately, because we have seen in the past especially that there's a lot of good proposals. There's a lot of proposals that are actually ranked, and the money is not enough to fund all of them. So what the Commission does is then of course, rank them based on the weighted number there, and fund until the funds run off. And unfortunately, we have the examples in the past of very good proposals that are very highly ranked and that don't receive funding because there's no more funding available. So what you receive in this case is a seal of excellence from the European Commission. Some countries have already started to finance with national funding, at least partially, these kind of projects that receive the seal. And in Switzerland, the discussions are open for the moment. There's not really another funding opportunity based on this seal of excellence. This is also important to understand. Yep, that's unfortunately a very low number that represents the success rate for the first years of this phase 1 SME instrument. But the good news is that in Switzerland, this number is much higher. So this is not only because there's a good support. I think that's important. There's a good support network to help Swiss companies. And then Swiss companies are always on the top of every innovation ranking, at least in Europe. So that these are factors that have to be taken into account, of course. There's also other factors. So for example, I think there's also the knowledge of not having only the SME instrument as a support opportunity. So some countries, the national funding or the national support opportunities are not so many. So a lot of companies will turn into easy to access instruments. So this is also a message again for you. If you feel somehow, or if you're not sure that this is the right instrument, please come to us. And if it's not the right instrument, there will be something else. It's quite, even if it's only 10 pages in this case, or 30 pages for phase 2 proposal, it's quite a lot of time invested into these submissions, and you can have an idea before if you have reasonable chances to get a grant or not. Now, phase 2 is the ideal continuation of a phase 1 project. And actually, we have seen in the past that phase 2 proposals coming from a phase 1 successful project have a much higher success rate than direct phase 2 proposals. So there's some kind of rationale behind how phase 1 and phase 2 are designed by the European Commission. And phase 2 is supposed to bring your concept, your business plan, really to the market. So basically, if you're talking about a project or a product, then if you're familiar with technology readiness levels, we are talking about a project that starts from technology readiness level 6. So this means you already have some kind of prototype of your product. And you can go on from there. So you can finish the prototype. You can try your product on the market with the first customers, or your prototype on the market. You can do validation and real world or real market testing of your product. All of these activities will be covered in this phase 2. And as you see, this is really the continuation in the ideas of the Commission of the phase 1. So it starts from the business plan, and it lasts 12 to 24 months for a funding that goes from 500,000 to 2.5 million. So this is also very similar to the SME instrument that we have seen for this year, 2017. The maximum funding of 2.5 million is specified in the work program, but there's also the specification that some exceptions might apply. So I'm not sure what it means exactly, but I'm thinking about the health domain, and I'll look to Charlotte to have a nod. Okay. So basically, if you can demonstrate that your project will have much higher costs, you can reasonably ask for more money in this phase. Another important aspect of this phase, but also of the previous phase, is the coaching that is offered together with the funding. and this is very specific business coaching. In this case, it's up to 12 days with a coach that you choose from a list of accredited coaches by the European Commission. This coach is the Enterprise Europe Network will contact you once you win this kind of projects to help you identify the best coach for your needs. It can be linked to these projects, or it can also be linked to the situation of your company, of your SME. So it can be an organizational coach that helps you scale up your company. It can be a financial coach. It can be very specific. It can be a coach that is based in a market where you want to enter and that has experience in this sense. And I think this is a really, really interesting opportunity as much as the funding. So of course, the final goal in this case, in this second phase, is to have a commercial product ready for introducing it to the market. Yes, please.
Can it be also like for SME that want to develop a new product, but they have already one, and they would like to diversify or something like this? Is it still applicable to occasion?
Yes, so the question is if these kind of projects also cover an SME that is already in the market with one product and wants to develop another one. And this is the case. So again, in the general sense, it should be a disruptive product, so pretty different probably than what you have already. But it's not limited to startups that really start. Again, here, the IP protection is important to include in your projects. This just as a reminder. Same thing for phase 2. You see the first deadline is quite close to the beginning of the year, it's 10th of January. And then there are 3 more for 2018. And then there are 4 more, 19 and 4 more in 20. Each deadline or each cutoff date better have the same budget allocated. And the budget is much higher in this case. Well, of course, these are bigger projects than phase 1. The proposal maximum length in this case is 30 pages. The evaluation follows more or less the same rules for the first step. So we can see, sorry, you will receive the slides at the end. So this slide is exactly the same. So in this first step of evaluation for phase 2 is exactly the same as before with the 2 criteria.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Up until now, it was actually the threshold was at 12. Did they change it to 13?
It's like this now, yes.
So it's harder now than it was this year?
I wouldn't say harder because anyways, if you there was not enough funding anyways.
This threshold is already coming to the next year calls. Or it's already now.
Starting in 2018, yes, for all of that deadlines. So this is also new. For phase 2 projects, there's a 2-step evaluation procedure. First step, as before. Second step is one-to-one meetings with evaluators. So I think the idea that the Commission has is to fix the dates where these meetings will take place for each cutoff date already. So you can kind of book it in your agenda if you're submitting. And then all the proposals that pass the thresholds of step 1 will be ranked from best to worst of the bests, and will be invited from the top to the bottom until the double of the funding available is actually invited to the interviews. The interviews will start again from the best proposal ranked, and you will meet with these interviewers. And the interviews will focus really on clarifying some aspects of your proposal. So they will be focused on your project, on your proposal that you submitted. The outcome is very simple, either a A or a B, and all proposals that will receive an A will receive funding. This means that you can have proposals that in step 1 had a lower grade that will receive funding, and proposals that in step 1 had a higher grade that were not so successful maybe in defending their proposal during the interview that will unfortunately not receive funding. This is a bit complicated, so if there are questions now on this, yes?
So, as there is no theme
Yes.
next year, so how is the proposal evaluated between,
Yes.
you know, healthcare, ICT, and all the calls which we went through? You know, how is that?
This is an excellent question. So the question is how the proposals are evaluated when there's no team anymore. So basically the evaluators cannot be, as they are now, specialists in one team more than in another. The answer is that at the moment of, I think, submission, you will have to specify a list of keywords that identify your thematic, and then the evaluators will be selected based on these keywords. And at the moment, the Commission is looking, I think they are looking for evaluators right now, and they are looking for all possible thematic, not as before. So from the pool of evaluators, the ones that will evaluate step 1 and step 2 will have a link to the keywords you specified at the moment of submission.
Would that also be, so if an evaluator comes in on a project, would that be also regarded as evaluate the evaluator if he has a conflict of interest with that proposal?
So what I know about the possible conflicts of interest of evaluators with respect to proposal, what I know is that you can specify a couple of names that you don't want to evaluate your proposal at proposal stage. I'm not sure if then there's something more that you can do, but I don't think so for the moment.
That's one thing, and the other thing, of course, is, I mean, there's not just one evaluator, there will be multiple evaluators to ensure that this really is a democratic and fair process.
And actually, if you look at this, then you see that if one of the evaluator gives very bad grades, then it's completely out of the game, taking the median and not the average. That was another question. Yes.
I just wanted to ask if there are any criteria of the company, the size or the years that it still holds that increases the rate of success?
Yes, I have some. So the question is basically not on the eligibility, but on the feedback from past results, on the success based on the size. So I have some data after. We tend to forget, at least from our side, that there's also a phase 3 of the SME instrument available. This is because basically the activities linked to this phase 3 until now were not so developed. But it's also an important phase. It's also an important step in the support of the SME instrument. But differently from the phase 1 and phase 2, you cannot really apply to this. This phase 3 is accessed and accessible to all the SMEs that won a phase 1 and phase 2 or phase 2 project. It's also available to all the companies and researchers that won a future emerging technology project or a Fasttrack to innovation. And in this phase 3, there's no funding. There's no direct funding to the company available, but there's a lot of different types of support under the form of specific trainings or access to international trade fairs or partnering and networking with external investors and with other winners of the projects in the Innovation Council. this is also, again, not necessarily subsequent to phase 1 and phase 2, but these services can also be delivered during one of your projects. And in the end, there's also a mentoring scheme that will start next year. So this mentoring is basically helping probably smaller or younger companies to meet CEOs of bigger companies, bigger sized enterprises. And this is really related to help personal leadership skills of the founders of the companies that are successful in the SME instrument phase 1 and phase 2. So this could also be a very interesting opportunity when you win one of those projects, and more details will be introduced during the course of next year. So this is what I think can help to answer the question I received before. It's a bit small, maybe. So this is just first information on the fact that if you win a phase 1, you are twice more successful when applying to a phase 2. Yes?
Why is it like this? There are some specific criteria to evaluate the proposal. How does this influence?
Yeah, so sorry, I have to repeat every question for the video. The question is why do we have this? There's no specific criteria, so the evaluators will not receive instructions in order to facilitate access to phase 2 to only companies that won a phase 1. But I think that what happens is that the outcome of a phase 1 is a much better starting point to start a phase 2 than just coming by yourself without a previous support phase. But there's really no criteria at evaluation linked to this. And another interesting fact is that 40%, basically, if you look at the phase 1 to phase 2 life cycle, so the time between a successful phase 1 to a successful phase 2, it can be really short. So 40% of the projects that go from phase 1 to phase 2 have only less than 1 year between the two phases. So basically, you apply almost right away at the end of your phase 1. And but still, a percentage has a longer time, which means that they probably still had to work on their business plan or on their project idea, or maybe some of the results of phase 1 made that they had to kind of change or modify their strategy. This is interesting because it says that the SME instrument funds projects and companies that are highly risky. 15% of the funded SMEs are pre-revenue. Some interesting feedback also on the coaching aspect. Coaching helps in different domains, and 89% of the SMEs agree that the coaching actually helped them during the process of a phase 1 or a phase 2. So this is also an encouraging number to tell the Commission that this coaching opportunity is worthwhile. Then I think here is the answer to your question. So the SME instrument kind of started not really focused on startups, but we have seen that each year, and I just read from there, the SME instrument attracts more and more micro companies, so less than 10 employees. So these are 50% of all companies funded are less than 10 employees in size. And also startups. So this means less than 6 years of life of the company. And if you look at this graph here, you have phase 1 in dark blue and phase 2 in light blue. And it's kind of divided by the stage of life cycle, not of the company, but of the, not of the project, but of the company itself. So you can see that, okay, there's a lot of companies that are really in the seed stage, so at the very beginning, especially for phase 1. But also, and especially for phase 2, there are companies that are really existing already. So this is also an answer to the other question that I received before. And for much more details on this, and even going even more into deep in these numbers, there's a source there on the slide you can click through, and it's a very well done impact survey report from the Commission, and there's all this kind of data. So as a small parenthesis, these data are also interesting to us in order to advise new companies that approach us. So when you come with your idea, we can also see based on your size, on your type of company, we will also advise you based on this. Now, if we move to the second part of the agenda, I focused really on my presentation on the SME instrument, but there are also other type of projects, other type of funding available. It's also bottom-up, and the first one I want to present is the Fasttrack to Innovation projects. This is really a test bench. This will fund the test bench to validate your innovation directly with users before a full market introduction. The focus of these projects is really the interdisciplinarity. So these are not anymore individual projects. These projects need a consortium. So you have to have at least 3 partners, and it's encouraged that these partners come from different backgrounds, from different thematic areas. And okay, if you go through the buzzwords there, the Commission wants to see the translation of new ideas into socio-economic value, shaping new markets, disruptive, blah, blah. But basically, you have to show the impact of your ideas. You have to show how this prototype that you have, when brought to the market, will really impact the market, will really bring value to the consumers and to your company or to the companies that are part of your consortium. Important to understand, the participation of industry is mandatory, so this is really a sign that the European Commission wants to see the concrete impact that you will have on the market. And these projects have to be driven by the market, actually. The shape of these projects is like a standard for who is familiar with Horizon 2020 innovation action, so this means that you receive 70% of the costs that are eligible within the project. And the size is approximately around 2 million euros in the past when these projects started, but up to 3 million euros. And to give you an idea of the length of the projects, they go in between 12 and 24 months with a 36-month limit. 36 is also the limit that you have in order to really bring the product to the market. The funding limits the success rate of these projects. These are also very interesting because you can really go for highly risky, highly out of the blue ideas, but the success rate remains quite low. Some details again. So this is similar to before. You have to start from a prototype and then bring it to the market in these 24 to 36 months. This I mentioned again, and IP is very important here as well. And the impact that you will have on the market has to be clear to the evaluators. In a consortium that you will need to apply to this kind of projects, it's a good idea to include startups with totally groundbreaking ideas, and then help them as an industry partner or as a research partner to bring their groundbreaking idea to the market. In this case, there are 3 cutoff dates per year. But apart from that, it works more or less as the SME instrument. So the submission is open, and you have these cutoff dates, and you receive the results after. The budget is lower. It's still divided equally between cutoff dates every year, but just so you know, approximately 30 to 35 projects will be funded all over Europe per year. So this gives you an idea of the difficulty of this kind of projects. Goodbye. I think the beamer doesn't work anymore without Charlotte. I'll just go, okay, I can go back. Sorry about it. Yeah. Let's do this. See if it works now. It's the animation, probably. It doesn't like the animations. Okay. So we have seen the SME instrument, and we've seen the Fasttrack to Innovation. And now also a brief introduction to the future emerging technologies. This is a program that was existing in the past already, and it's brought in the European Innovation Council. But basically, it doesn't change so much. So this is still, if you have a look at the graph, it's still very early in the research. So this is very different than everything we talked about until now. It's very early exploration of future technologies. So there's no market entry in this case, at least not for the next years. And it's really a way for the Commission to support very early stage science and technology research for totally new future technologies. So this, you can really go totally crazy on our idea, and Europe will fund research for it. This again, the Commission is looking for interdisciplinary consortium, and they're looking for really new, game-changing technologies. In this case, as it's so far away from the market, this is a research and innovation action, so 100% of the costs are funded in these projects. The other parameters are similar to what we have seen before for the Fasttrack to Innovation. The details are there. Again, there's 4 deadlines, but this time it's 4 deadlines in the next 3 years. So be careful, there's no multiple deadlines, for example, in 2018. So if you plan to apply to one of these, be careful with the deadlines. Maybe just an overview of what will not be funded. So of course, you need a radical vision, but if you plan to research on a already established technological paradigm, even if it's very high risk, this will not be funded. Also, you're very far away from the market, but if you don't have a clear technological objective, this will not be funded again. And this is pretty similar to what we have seen before. Incremental research does not have a place here, so this will also not be funded. I have a colleague there that I think can give an example, actually.
The trick of open is very specific, really for very, what they call very disruptive technology. So you should not come there with, let's say, what they call incremental research, which is just a small improvement with 10 to 20% in some efficiency. It's really for new concepts which I've never seen. So basically, the typical example I give there, they are looking for Tim Berners-Lee at CERN in the 80s, which was playing around, exchanging messages between 2 computers, and that created HTML. three-dimensional, no, it's not a printer, but you can see objects in 3 dimensions in the air. And it's not optical based, but it's just particle in the air, floating in the air, that you can shape in any kind of shape you want. So this is the kind of ideas they are looking for.
Something important to note here is that in this case, and in this specific case, in the European Innovation Council, more impact at the evaluation moment will be on the excellence more than on impact. This is also, again, because it's so far away from the market. Also related is the FET Innovation Launchpad, which is a very interesting opportunity, but it's very limited because it's only for participants to previous FET projects. So if you're interested in that, just we'll be running a bit late, so just come to me after, or to Francesco. And the last part of the European Innovation Council I will present briefly today is the innovation prizes. So these are an interesting type of projects because they aim to boost breakthrough innovation like the previous projects. But what they do is to set a very ambitious goal by 2021 in general. And they don't say anything to you. So they don't say how they want you to reach this aim, reach this objective. They don't say what kind of consortium you should have, or if you should be just an innovator by yourself working on something in a lab. They just give you these goals with some more, just a little bit more, one sentence more specification of the ambitious goal they want, and they give you the budget that they will give to the funded projects. We will have more details on this by the end of the year, but I already put here the titles because I think you can already see if you could fit in one of these areas that they're looking for. So this is the summary for you. You have here, and on these 2 sheets of paper that you will find here, more details really concretely on the deadlines, on the budgets, and on how to apply. But for the moment, this is all from my side. I'd like to finish with this nice sentence of the European Commission when they were here for our previous event in Bern. This is a very good sign for Switzerland. We were not associated for a long time. Now we are fully in. And so I wish a good success to all of you that want to apply. And please do not hesitate to come to us for bilateral advice. If you have any questions, then now is the moment, I guess.